You wake just before dawn, the kind of morning where the air feels too still, where even the birds are hesitant to sing. You blink against the dim gray light, and for a moment, everything seems unchanged. But something's off. Rome, the city that once ruled the known world, feels tired. Not like a city sleeping peacefully, but like an old giant gasping for air. Its marble streets still echo with sandals and hooves, but the pace is slower, the chatter duller, the sparkle gone. Did you know that Rome, at its peak, commanded over 60 million people across 3 continents, a marvel of roads, aqueducts, libraries, and laws? And yet, despite its glory, the Western Roman Empire fell not in one dramatic explosion, but in a slow, tragic unraveling. And tonight, you're going to walk every step of that fall. Stay to uncover the secret history they don't teach in school, the missteps, betrayals, and disasters that turned emperors into footnotes. And hey, if you love stories that peel back the past with a little mystery and drama, hit that like button and subscribe for more. I'm dying to know where you're listening from and what time it is. There, drop a comment and let's connect. As you step into this ancient world, imagine the smell of olive oil and dust, the soft hum of Latin prayers, the occasional clang of a soldier's armor echoing off the walls. Because this isn't just history, it's your story now. You begin your journey in the year 376 CE. That's when the first true crack appears. Not a collapse, not a war, but a decision, a quiet one. Eastern Roman authorities, eager to bolster their military, let the Visigoths' Germanic tribes pressed by the Huns cross the Danube into Roman territory. You'd think this would be a minor bureaucratic act. Instead, it's the moment the tide turns. These refugees aren't absorbed. They're exploited, mistreated, and finally, enraged. But don't jump ahead. That comes later. Right now. You're just walking through a city that looks strong on the surface. Rome's still the capital of imagination, but not the actual capital. That honor shifts between Milan, Ravenna, and other imperial outposts. The city is still rich, with senators who host banquets as extravagant as any influencer's Paris trip gold platters, peacock meat, honeyed dormice. Yeah, dormice. Bet your charcuterie board never tried that one. But underneath the silver trays and scented oil lies rot. The army is bloated with mercenaries who don't speak Latin. The bureaucracy, once razor sharp, is tangled in bribes and family favors, and emperors. Well, they're less Julius Caesar and more reality TV. One gets strangled in his sleep, another exiled by his own mother, and a third can't even keep control of his palace guards. You glance at a public notice plastered on a crumbling wall. It's a tax decree. Again, landowners groan, merchants weep, and peasants, they just vanish fleeing to the countryside or falling into debt bondage. Historians still argue whether Rome fell because of internal decay or outside pressure. But here, walking through its decaying grandeur, it's hard to tell where the line is. The temples still stand, but some are converted into churches. Senators still debate, but fewer show up. Gladiators no longer fight, but the Colosseum remains, its stones cracked, its chambers echoing with ghosts. Want to know something weird? By the 5th century, many Romans don't even remember what the Republic was like. They've lived under emperors for so long. Freedom just means being left alone by tax collectors. There's no big dream of liberty, just survival. And yet, life goes on. A Roman mother braids her daughter's hair with care. A baker hums as he slides flatbread into a stone oven. The aqueduct still brings water, even if it leaks more than it used to. You pass a shrine with fading frescoes. Jupiter, Mars, Venus, but fewer people leave offerings these days. Christianity's rising, its bishops wielding power that rivals generals. Some say it's weakening Rome. Others say it's Rome's last moral glue. Either way, temples are being shut down quietly, their priests replaced by men in robes who preach salvation instead of conquest. Still, you can't help but feel the tension in the air, like Rome knows something's coming, something it can't stop. And then there's the gossip. You overhear whispers about barbarians near the Danube, about bribes paid to warlords, about a strange new tribe riding west the Huns. No one knows who they are. Some say they're demons. Others say they eat raw meat under their saddles. One man laughs and says they'll never get past the mountains. You wonder if he sleeps soundly. You pass an old senator's villa with ivy strangling the pillars. He used to host poetry nights. Now, he hires extra guards and keeps his granaries locked tight. His grandson plays with toy soldiers in the courtyard. You wonder if the boy knows those toys will be real soon. Here's a quirky detail most people forget around this time. Roman officials actually passed laws forcing farmers to stay on their land, not because they were lazy, but because so many were fleeing. They had to be legally chained to their livelihoods, kind of like ancient non-compete clauses, but with spears. The empire isn't dead yet, but it's breathing through a straw, and you walk through the fading heartbeat of Western civilization. You can smell the dust in the air, mixed with incense and fear. You can hear the clink of coin, real silver. For now, changing hands for something as basic as grain. And deep in your bones, you know something is shifting. Tonight, you stand on the edge of the abyss. Rome doesn't fall in one day. But tonight, the ground beneath your sandals is just starting to give way. You stand beneath the heavy purple banner of an emperor's tent, its gold-threaded edges rippling in the late afternoon wind. From a distance, it looks impressive, imperial, even, but step closer, and the illusion fades. The guards are tired. The standard is fraying. And the emperor, he barely looks old enough to shave. This is the era of emperors with no clothes. Not literally, though one did apparently wear silk gowns cut like women's robes, much to the court's embarrassment. No, you're witnessing the unraveling of imperial dignity, one incompetent ruler at a time. You've probably heard the names of Rome's great emperors, Augustus, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius. But what about Honorius or Valentinian III? Probably not. And there's a reason you could fill a tavern with the short-lived, weak-willed, or outright useless emperors of the late Western Roman Empire. It's like watching the decline of a once great rock band. First, they headline the Colosseum. Then it's just birthday parties and small-town fairs. Right now, in 395 CE, Theodosius, Rome's last strong, unified emperor, has just died. You watch from a balcony as his two sons inherit a divided empire. Honorius gets the west, Arcadius gets the east. It's a bit like handing one child the family yacht and the other a sinking canoe. The west is plagued by poor defenses, an unstable economy, and constant invasions. The east wealthier, more centralized, and ready to ghost their struggling sibling. You try to catch a glimpse of Honorius. the new Western emperor. He's 10, literally, 10 years old. And while children are adorable, they don't typically manage empires. Historians still argue whether putting a child on the throne was desperation or delusion. Either way, you can already feel things slipping. Behind every boy emperor stands a power-hungry general, and this time it's Stilicho. A competent military man, yes, but also part vandal, and entirely too eager to be the real power behind the throne. You sit through a council meeting where Stilicho gives orders while Honorius plays with a pet chicken. No joke, Honorius really loved chickens. 1. He named Rome. No symbolism there at all, right? As the years pass, you see this pattern repeat again and again. Weak emperors propped up by strong men who either protect them, betray them, or use them as shields until it's convenient to toss them aside. Sometimes the emperors are assassinated, sometimes exiled. One was even clubbed to death in a sack. You can't make this stuff up. Another abdicated to become a monk. Not a terrible choice, honestly, considering the job perks included death threats and mutinies. And who are these emperors really leading? Not the people, not the Senate, mostly just factions, military elites, political cronies, and increasingly, barbarian allies. You see men in Roman armor who barely speak Latin. You see court intrigues more dramatic than a season finale, poisonings, backstabbing, secret letters. It's like Game of Thrones, minus the dragons. By 423 CE, a man named Joannes claims the throne without even bothering to ask the Eastern Empire for approval. That's a red flag. You pace nervously in the palace as ambassadors argue over legitimacy. Rome used to crown emperors with ceremony and grandeur. Now it's more like speed dating in a war zone. Oh, and the people. They're losing faith. Imagine living under 10 emperors in 40 years. Would you trust the next one to save you? Or would you start listening to the local bishop, the general, the warlord who promises grain and peace? One obscure but telling detail by this period: coins with emperors' faces are often so poorly minted you can't tell who it is. The symbolism is fading. So is the confidence. And here's where things get especially chaotic. Every time a half-decent general appears, the court grows paranoid. They either execute him for treason or sideline him with fake honors. You attend one such ceremony. They pin a fancy cloak on a man and call him master of soldiers. He smiles, bows, and disappears, poisoned by the next full moon. The emperors no longer inspire loyalty. They inspire plotting. In one ironic twist, a barbarian leader named Ricimer becomes kingmaker in all but name. He installs puppet emperors, controls the military, and even chooses which cities get grain shipments. The emperors are officially in charge, but it's Ricimer who pulls the strings, still. Rome pretends. It holds ceremonies. It publishes edicts. It tries to look strong. But when you lift the curtain, you see the truth. The throne is just a chair. And these emperors, actors in a play the audience has stopped believing in. One day, you walk past a school where children still read Virgil and dream of civic virtue. Their teacher weeps quietly at his desk. The empire he teaches about doesn't exist anymore, not really. And here's the kicker: even when the emperors die or vanish, the machine lurches forward. New faces, new coins, new lies. But you know better. You've seen the chicken. You've seen the bribes. You've seen the sack beatings and poison goblets and golden masks over rotting faces. This isn't an empire. It's a ghost wearing Roman robes. And still, you ask, how does it keep going? The answer's simple. Momentum. Habit. Fear of the alternative. You watch a general pin a brooch on the next child emperor. You hear the crowd cheer, tired but loyal. You watch an old senator bow, his knees shaking. And you wonder, how long can a system run on appearances alone? You finger a small bronze coin in your palm. It's stamped with the emperor's face, probably Honorius, though it's hard to tell. The features are worn, the metal feels thin, and the weight is barely there. Just like the empire it represents, it's the late 4th century, and the Western Roman economy is unraveling in slow motion, not with a dramatic crash, but with 1,000 tiny cracks tax burdens that break farmers, gold that disappears from circulation, and inflation that makes your money feel more like playthings than currency. You duck into a crowded market in Mediolanum, what today you'd call Milan. Traders grumble behind their stalls. Prices change faster than they can scribble them on wax boards. Salt costs double what it did last year. Bread tripled. A woman offers to trade a bolt of dyed cloth for a sack of grain. No one accepts. They all want hard currency gold or silver, but hardly anyone has it. You watch a man try to pay in copper coins. The vendor sneers and waves him off. The coins are so debased, they're practically tin. Here's the thing. Most people don't realize Rome didn't just fall to swords and spears. It bled out through its treasury. Historians still argue whether this was due to overspending, bad tax policy, or the sheer cost of maintaining a global empire. The answer: probably all three. And you're stuck living in the middle of it. The imperial government, desperate to fund its military and bureaucracy, has been churning out more and more coins with less and less precious metal. You pass a money changer who bites a coin to test its purity. He spits. Fake as the emperor's promises. He mutters, "You know it's bad when soldiers, those who used to march proudly under the eagle standard, are paid with land instead of money. And not good land. Swamps, rocky hills, border zones crawling with raiders." You watch one retiree stare at his reward and mutter, "I used to guard the emperor. Now I get goats and bad soil. And what about taxes? They're no longer just high, they're cruel. The state demands its share whether the harvest fails or not." You watch tax collectors show up at a villa, demanding payment in grain, livestock, or even family heirlooms. One farmer can't pay. His daughter is taken instead, as an indentured servant to cover the debt. No one speaks out. Everyone watches. And you feel sick. There's a lesser-known law passed around this time that says if a tenant flees a farm, the landlord is still responsible for the taxes. You chuckle bitterly. So, naturally, landlords start chaining peasants to the land. It's not called slavery, but it sure smells like it. This isn't just economic policy. It's the birth of medieval serfdom. And trade, that vibrant Roman network of roads, ships, and merchants you read about. It's breaking apart. North Africa, the breadbasket of the Western Empire, is constantly under threat by vandals. Shipping lanes are no longer safe. Pirates prowl the coasts, and roads crumble from neglect and raids. You try to buy Egyptian papyrus in Ravenna and get laughed at. Right on bark, the vendor jokes, "At least trees don't need bribes. Meanwhile, the East hoards its wealth. Constantinople still glitters, its markets flush with silk, spices, and gold coins that actually weigh something. But the East no longer bails out the West. You're on your own. You send a letter requesting financial assistance. It vanishes like so many others. Even the cities are shrinking. Rome itself, once a bustling hub of over 1 million people, now feels hollow. You walk through entire blocks where windows are shuttered, fountains dry, and statues defaced. Some districts are being abandoned altogether. It's easier to live off the land than deal with taxes, crime, and corrupt officials. Yet in the midst of this decay, strange things happen. You pass by a blacksmith stall where he's reforging old bronze statues into horseshoes. The head of Augustus lies half melted in a bucket. The blacksmith shrugs. He's more useful this way. You can't argue. You notice a new fashion. 2 traders and officials hiding wealth in jewelry, brooches, and belts instead of coin purses. It's less obvious, easier to run with, harder to tax. And here's a quirky twist: barter comes back in style. You witness a deal where a monk trades a manuscript of Virgil's Aeneid for 2 cured hams and a cloak. Literature for lunch. That's the world you're in now. You walk past a military camp where recruits are training with wooden swords. Not because they're traditionalists, because they can't afford enough steel. The blacksmith blames a shipment lost at sea, or stolen, or taxed. No one's really sure anymore. Then comes the worst part, the feeling of powerlessness. The empire was once a machine of order and progress. Now, it's a patchwork of desperate people just trying to survive the month. You meet a widow who keeps her husband's armor in perfect condition, not as a memento, but because she might need to sell it for food. You spot a graffiti scrawled on a wall near the old Senate building. It reads, "We sell what we once worshipped, and worship what we once burned." A twist on an old saying. You wonder who wrote it and how long it will last before someone scrapes it off. The economy doesn't collapse all at once, but it corrodes everything: trust, stability, hope. You begin to understand why the elite retreat to their villas, fortify their lands, and act like minor kings. The state no longer protects them, so they build their own private militias. You attend one such gathering, where a wealthy landowner refers to himself as Dominus, not senator, not citizen. Lord. The empire's soul is being pawned, one tax decree at a time. And still, you walk these streets. You watch people haggle over onions. Children chase rats for fun or food. And you realize survival has replaced citizenship. A Roman used to be proud. Now a Roman is just someone who hasn't fled yet. You stand on the edge of a Roman frontier, the wind curling cold around your shoulders. Before you, a wooden palisade splintered, patched, and manned by soldiers who look more like exhausted farmers than warriors. Beyond it, a horizon darkened not by clouds, but by the steady movement of unfamiliar banners. The barbarians are coming. You've probably heard that phrase thrown around barbarians at the gate, but now you see it up close. And it's not what you expected. This isn't just a wild horde of screaming savages. This is something more organized, more persistent, and far more complex. The truth is, barbarian was a Roman word for not us. And Rome had been recruiting, trading with, and depending on these outsiders for centuries. But now, the relationship is unraveling. The Western Empire's borders are cracking like old glass. Once, Rome built massive stone walls, forts, and military roads stretching from the Scottish Highlands to the Syrian desert. Now you walk past posts, abandoned or undermanned, bridges washed out, signal towers unlit. The once proud legions guarding the Rhine and Danube are a skeleton crew, often filled with conscripts who speak little Latin and even less loyalty. You meet a commander who shows you a roster. Half his men are Franks, a quarter are Sarmatians. Only a few are born Roman, and even they've never seen Italy. It's not a Roman army, he says with a bitter laugh. It's a barbarian army wearing Roman boots. So what happened? Simple. The Western Empire can't afford its own defense anymore. It relies more and more on federati barbarian groups hired as allies, given land or gold in exchange for military service. On paper, it sounds clever. In reality, you're watching the empire outsource its survival. And these allies, they know their value. You remember that earlier decision, letting the Visigoths cross the Danube in 376. That wasn't a one-time event. It set a precedent. Now tribe after tribe, Goths, Franks, Vandals, Suebi, Alans are entering Roman lands, sometimes as allies, often as invaders, and occasionally as both. You travel along the Rhine and find a village half burned, not by foreign raiders, but by Gothic mercenaries angry over late payments. Next time, one mutters, we'll burn Rome itself. You don't know it yet, but he won't be joking. Here's a quirky but telling story. One commander, desperate to appease his Germanic troops, minted coins with the image of Hercules, a barbarian favorite, instead of traditional Roman symbols. It's like replacing the eagle with a bear in hopes your guard dog stops biting you. The old Roman identity is blurring. You meet a Gothic warlord named Alaric. He wears Roman armor, speaks Latin, quotes Roman law, but he's not Roman. He's been denied a stable role in the imperial system for too long, and he's done asking. He wants land, title, respect. Rome offers none. And so, Alaric sharpens his sword and begins to march. As you walk south through Gaul, you notice something strange. People are less afraid of the barbarians than of the Roman tax collectors. When the empire retreats from an area, locals sometimes welcome the newcomers. At least they don't steal our grain and call it tax. One farmer tells you, you don't know whether to laugh or cry. In Spain, the Suebi carve out a kingdom. In North Africa, the Vandals are making their move. You can almost feel the empire stretching too thin, like dough across too many baking pans. It looks whole, but you touch it and your fingers break through. Historians still argue whether Rome could have survived if it had better integrated these migrating peoples. Some say, yes, a multicultural empire was possible. Others argue the rot was already too deep. You're not sure. All you know is that the so-called barbarians are growing bolder, better organized, and increasingly Roman in their own right. One night, you sit at a fire with a Gothic chieftain. He tells stories of Roman betrayal, broken treaties, and insults heaped on his people. He pokes at the flames and says, Rome thought we were dogs, but now the dogs are in the house. It's not just the size of the pressure, it's the timing. The empire is weak, distracted, and divided. You overhear letters from Ravenna, the western capital, now filled with infighting and paranoia. While Rome squabbles over titles, Whole provinces are slipping through its fingers. And here's something few remember. Some Roman leaders even invited barbarian groups into the empire to fight other barbarian groups. It's like hiring a wolf to guard your sheep from the fox. Eventually, you just have wolves. You walk a road through what was once Roman Gaul. Now, it's a patchwork of Gothic settlements, half-abandoned villas, and old milestones cracked by frost. A boy carves a boar into a pillar, once bearing Caesar's name. He doesn't know who Caesar was. He only knows the empire is fading, and his people are rising. As you return toward Italy, you catch glimpses of fear on the faces of city officials. They read reports of troop movements and whispered rumors. One man clutches a wine cup and mutters, "The Visigoths are headed south." Another corrects him, "They're already in the Alps. The barbarians aren't just at the gates, they're inside. And this time, they're not leaving." You crouch in a dark forest clearing, damp leaves beneath your knees, your breath held as the air grows tense. You're not hiding from beasts or wild men tonight. You're watching the Visigoths gather. Their leader, Alaric, stands by the fire, tall, sharp-eyed, more commanding than any Roman emperor you've met so far. His men hang on his words as he speaks in a fierce, rhythmic tongue that you don't quite understand, but you don't need to. You can feel the intent revenge. Welcome to the Gothic time bomb. It didn't have to be this way. When the Visigoths were first allowed into the Roman Empire back in 376 CE, they were desperate refugees fleeing the terrifying advance of the Huns. They'd crossed the Danube with hopes of safety and a better life. But Rome failed them. Spectacularly. You might remember this. Roman officials agreed to provide the Goths with food and land. What they actually delivered: rotten meat, extortion, and outright abuse. One governor famously sold dog meat at famine prices. Another took Gothic children as hostages in exchange for grain. You think that's going to lead to friendship? So now you're here in the early 400s, watching the fallout. The Visigoths, once willing allies, have become a military force with their own goals. And Alaric, he's not just a warrior, he's a tactician, a negotiator, and most importantly, a man who knows the Roman system inside and out. He once served in the Roman army. He knows its weaknesses, its arrogance. Historians still argue whether Alaric ever truly wanted to destroy Rome, or just to carve out a fair deal for his people. But after years of rejection, broken treaties, and imperial backstabbing, diplomacy is dead. And now he's marching south, straight toward the Eternal City. You travel with his forces, tough men in mismatched armor, some wielding Roman weapons, others with ancestral axes and carved wooden shields. They move with eerie discipline for a barbarian horde. They don't plunder wantonly, not yet. This is calculated. Alaric's playing a long game. He sends messengers to the emperor, demanding land and titles. "Let us settle in peace," he offers, "and we'll serve as defenders of the empire." But the Western court, paralyzed in Ravenna, refuses. Some advisors laugh off the threat. A few angry barbarians won't breach Roman walls. You hear a soldier scoff. They said the same about Hannibal, so Alaric lays siege, not once, not twice, but 3 times. In the year 408 CE, he surrounds Rome. The city hasn't been threatened like this in 800 years. You stand on the Aurelian walls and look down at the enemy camps, quiet, patient, like wolves waiting for their prey to drop its guard. Inside the city, panic rises like smoke. Food prices skyrocket. Grain runs out. Rats start looking like lunch. There are reports of people selling their children into slavery for bread. The rich try to flee. The poor curse them. The Senate, once the proud heart of the empire, now trembles in indecision. You visit a church and see people praying desperately, not just to God, but to old Roman gods, just in case. It's a bizarre blend of faith and fear. A bishop whispers, "Rome has sinned. This is divine punishment." Others blame treachery, or sorcery, or just bad luck. Quirky detail at one point. The Romans try to buy Alaric off with a massive payment gold, silver, silk, and peppercorns. Yes, pepper. It was worth its weight in gold. Alaric agrees, but only temporarily. It's not about loot. It's about respect, about being heard. And Rome refuses to listen. In 410 CE, Alaric stops asking. The Visigoths breach the gates, some say, with help from slaves inside the city. Others claim divine judgment. All you know is that when the walls finally open, the unthinkable happens. Rome is sacked. You walk through the streets as chaos erupts. Fires crackle. Statues fall. Temples are looted. But it's not complete anarchy. Alaric orders his men not to destroy Christian churches. He wants a statement, not senseless ruin. Still, the psychological impact is catastrophic. Imagine living in the most powerful city the world had ever known and watching it get looted by people your ancestors once called savages. It's like waking up and finding your marble mansion has termites. Armed termites. The sack lasts only 3 days, but the wound it leaves is deep and permanent. You sit in the forum afterward, rubble around you, smoke in the air, and you realize Rome's not just a city anymore, it's an idea. And that idea has just been shattered. Word spreads quickly. Across Europe, people gasp. In Constantinople, nobles weep openly. One bishop reportedly cries, "If Rome can fall, what is safe?" And here's where things turn truly surreal. Alaric dies just weeks later. Suddenly, some say it was illness. Others whisper poison or divine wrath. He's buried in secret legend says his followers diverted a river, buried him in the riverbed with treasure, and then killed the workers to keep the location hidden. Historians still debate if it's true. But hey, if you ever want to go treasure hunting in southern Italy after Alaric's death, the Visigoths don't vanish. They don't fade. They evolve. They move on, eventually settling in Gaul and Spain, founding kingdoms that call themselves Roman in everything but name. Latin lives on, so does law. But it's clear the power isn't coming back to Rome. You leave the smoldering city behind, heart heavy. Rome didn't fall in one night, but tonight, it stumbled so hard it may never stand the same again. You march east now, toward a place whispered about, in anxious tones, Adrianople. The name doesn't mean much to the average Roman anymore, but if you'd been there in 378 CE, you'd never forget it. Even now, decades later, the ground still seems to remember. The wind blows colder, the birds stay quieter, and the locals avoid that plain with nervous glances, because this is where everything changed. Adrianople was the first real rupture. The moment Rome's invincibility died, you arrived just before dawn. The sun barely rising over fields that looked deceptively peaceful until you squint and notice odd mounds in the soil. Small depressions like faded footprints. This is where the Eastern Roman Emperor Valens, full of pride and poor intelligence, led his legions into disaster. Here's how it went down. Back in 376, when the Visigoths begged entry into the empire to escape the Huns. Valens let them in partially to look like a good guy, partially to recruit new soldiers. Bad idea. Corrupt Roman officials mistreated the newcomers so badly that resentment turned into rebellion. Fast forward 2 years, and now you're at Adrianople. Valens has brought an army to crush the Visigoths before his nephew, Gratian, can arrive with reinforcements from the west. He's impatient. He wants the glory for himself. Historians still argue whether he underestimated the enemy, lacked proper scouts, or was just drunk on pride. Probably all three. You walk through the imperial camp the night before the battle. Officers mutter about numbers they don't have good intelligence. Some think they outnumber the enemy. Some say the opposite. Valens. He decides to attack anyway. It's hot. The Romans are exhausted from marching. And still, they advance. You watch from a nearby rise as the legions take position. Shields clatter. Horses stamp. Dust rises. The Gothic camp appears poorly defended, too quiet. Some Roman officers grow suspicious. Where's the cavalry, one asks. Then the trap springs. Gothic cavalry, hidden in the hills, thunder into view. You feel the earth shake. The Roman lines try to shift, but they're boxed in front, rear, and flanks. Confusion ripples through the ranks. Commanders shout, but it's chaos. Spears fly. Horses crash into shield walls. Archers fire from behind wagons. Valens vanishes in the chaos. Some say he was killed by an arrow and burned in a farmhouse. Others think he tried to flee and was trampled. His body is never found. In just a few hours, 2/3 of the Eastern Roman army is annihilated. It's one of the worst defeats in Roman history. Worse than Cannae. Worse than Teutoburg Forest. You walk the field afterward, and it's silent except for the crows. Bodies everywhere. The stink is unbearable. You see broken helmets, snapped standards, and shields still gripped in cold fingers. A Roman physician tries to count the dead. He stops at $10,000. One quirky detail, a Gothic warrior later brags he used a Roman officer's polished breastplate as a shaving mirror. That's one way to recycle. The psychological damage is immense. Rome now knows, really knows it can lose. Not just battles, whole armies. The invincible aura of the legions is shattered. The empire, once feared by all, has become mortal. Back in Constantinople, panic sets in. Refugees flood the cities. Governors fortify walls. Bishop Ambrose of Milan delivers a fiery sermon, declaring that Rome's sins have invited divine punishment. The court is in turmoil. Who's next? Are the gates of the capital safe? You speak with senators who begin to question everything. Should we sue for peace, one whispers. Should we give the Goths land citizenship? Others call this madness. Give barbarians land, and they'll take the empire. It's a debate that never really ends. And in the West, they're watching closely. Rome learns a dangerous lesson. Desperate people, badly treated, can become your worst nightmare. Here's the twist after the battle. The Goths don't march on Constantinople. They don't destroy the empire. They negotiate. They want land and peace. The Eastern Empire, humbled, agrees. The Goths become semi-independent allies within Roman territory. This sets a precedent that changes everything. You watch as Gothic leaders like Fritigern are given Roman titles, land, and responsibilities. On paper, they're part of the system now. In practice, they're a kingdom, within a kingdom. This is the first real crack in the imperial shell. Rome now begins to rely more and more on federated barbarian groups to do the fighting, while Roman-born citizens grow increasingly detached. You sit in a town square where a teacher lectures on Cicero and Plato while Gothic troops march by. No one blinks. It's just the new normal. And something else shifts, something deeper. Identity. You meet a Roman officer whose father was born in Germania. He speaks fluent Gothic. He calls himself Roman. So does a bishop born in Hispania with Vandal ancestry. The empire is transforming not just politically, but culturally. And the people at the top, they can't decide whether that's evolution or collapse. You take one last look over the plains of Adrianople. The birds have returned now. Grass is growing again. But you know the truth. This isn't just a battlefield. It's a burial site for pride, for illusion, for the old Rome that thought it could rule forever. And as you ride west, toward Italy, you feel the weight of that loss settling in your bones. Rome didn't die here, but it learned it could. You step quietly into a candlelit church, the air thick with incense and murmured Latin prayers. A choir sings softly, their voices echoing off stone walls, older than the empire's latest emperor. You've seen emperors fall, armies crushed, borders collapse, but here, within the sanctuary, something else entirely is happening. Rome's gods are dying, and something strange is taking their place. Welcome to the theological tug-of-war at the heart of the Western Roman Empire's fall. For centuries, Roman identity was wrapped in its religion. Jupiter, Mars, Venus, the gods of war, love, power weren't just myths. They were state symbols. Emperors were semi-divine. Priests were civil servants. Temples were public spaces. But now, in the 4th and 5th centuries, Christianity has surged from the margins to the mainstream, transforming Rome from a polytheistic empire to a Christian one. You're watching this happen in real time, and it's as chaotic as any battle. Back in 312 CE, Constantine famously converted to Christianity and legalized the faith. But conversion didn't mean clarity. It meant new factions, new rivalries, and new debates, some of them deeply weird. You sit in on a council of bishops where one side argues Jesus is of the same substance as God, while others say he's a created being. The language is confusing, the tempers are hot, and the emperor is desperately trying to keep the peace. One bishop throws a book, another is exiled. Historians still argue whether Christianity helped save the empire or speed up its demise. Some say it offered hope and unity during turbulent times. Others say it hollowed out the old civic religion and replaced politics with theological bickering. You lean back in a wooden pew and listen to a preacher thunder against pagan temples. Tear them down, he cries. Break the idols, and they do. You pass by what used to be a shrine to Minerva, now a pile of rubble. It's stone repurposed for a church. The empire is literally rebuilding itself on the ruins of its past. Here's a quirky fact. Some bishops actually complained that Christian women were getting too passionate. They sold family jewels, donated dowries, even joined desert monasteries. One bishop wrote a letter urging women to, quote, "Leave some silk for your husband, dear." But this religious revolution isn't just about faith, it's about power. You meet Ambrose of Milan, who forces an emperor, yes, an emperor, to do public penance barefoot in the snow. The bishop wins. The emperor submits. You realize this isn't just a moral system anymore. It's a political force. In Rome, you overhear citizens confused and divided. Is it still okay to wear a laurel wreath, one asks? Do we celebrate Saturnalia or not? Another mutters, I miss the old gods. At least they didn't care who I slept with. It's not just a switch of symbols. It's an identity crisis. Some Christians argue for peace, compassion, and the rejection of worldly wealth. Others, like the Donatists, insist on purity and exile those who compromised during earlier persecutions. You witness churches torn apart, not by invaders, but by mobs of rival believers. One group sings hymns while hurling bricks. Welcome to 5th century theology. Even within the Christian fold, schisms bloom like mold. The Arians don't believe Jesus is fully divine. The Orthodox say he is. The Pelagians think humans can earn salvation. Augustine says, nope, only grace can save you. You sit in a courtyard and watch these arguments unfold with more venom than any senatorial debate. Speaking of Augustine, you visit Hippo, where the great bishop is writing the City of God. Rome has just been sacked, and pagans are blaming Christianity for weakening the empire. Augustine's response: the city of man is always falling. Only the city of God is eternal. He's right, in a way. But it doesn't help much when your bakery's been burned and your taxes just went up. You see something eerie. Roman law codes start including Christian doctrines. Heresy becomes a crime. Pagan rituals are outlawed. Priests become tax exempt. And the lines between church and state blur until you're not sure where one ends and the other begins. You overhear a scholar complain, once we debated justice and virtue, now we debate angels dancing on pins. He gets excommunicated, quietly. And the regular people, they're just trying to figure it all out. In a village in Gaul, a farmer sacrifices a chicken to Jupiter, just in case. Down the road, a nun scolds children for clapping during a festival. In Rome, aristocrats hedge their bets by donating to both Christian churches and old temples. You chuckle when you see a statue of Hercules tucked discreetly behind a curtain in a bishop's home. People are scared, confused, desperate for meaning, and Christianity, for all its growing pains, offers hope, eternal life, mercy, a purpose beyond Rome's crumbling infrastructure. But it also brings hierarchy, doctrine, intolerance. You hear of a philosopher stoned for refusing to renounce Neoplatonism, a temple burned in Alexandria by a mob led by a monk. This new order has zeal. The empire isn't just falling physically, it's transforming spiritually. What it means to be Roman is changing. You kneel at a baptismal font and run your fingers through the water. Cold, clear, a symbol of renewal, of rebirth, but also of forgetting. The Roman gods are gone now. The sacred fire of Vesta extinguished. The Vestal virgins disbanded. The Pontifex Maximus, that title belongs to the Pope. And as you leave the church, stepping back into streets paved with pagan stones and littered with Christian pamphlets, you wonder, is this salvation or just another empire wearing a different robe? You walk through the hushed streets of a once proud Roman town in Gaul, your footsteps echoing against buildings that feel hollow, not broken, not burned, just empty. The windows are shuttered, the bathhouse is cold, The school's nearly silent. It's like walking through a shell of something that used to be alive. This is what happens when the minds leave. Welcome to the Western Roman Empire's brain drain, where the brightest people pack their bags, abandon the West, and head east. Or they simply give up. You peek into a library, once bustling with scholars debating Virgil and Cicero. Now, there's one elderly scribe copying a scroll while yawning. He's got no apprentices. They all left for Constantinople. He grumbles, or joined the church, and he's not wrong. The Eastern Roman Empire. Byzantium is booming. Constantinople has gold, grain, guards, and glamour. Its schools are thriving. Its walls are strong. You hear people talk about the East like it's a different world. They've got baths that still work. They still have theaters. They haven't taxed their shoemakers out of business. Over time, ambitious Westerners begin to head east. Just like ambitious folks today head for New York or London. Bishops, engineers, lawyers, even philosophers. They want stability, and Rome no longer offers it. You attend a farewell feast for a scholar moving to Antioch over spiced wine. He laments. We used to send books to the East. Now we send bodies. He clinks cups with a minor noble who's marrying his daughter off to a Greek merchant. Better olive oil than bloodshed. The noble jokes, half-heartedly. And yet, the rot isn't just in talent. It's in civic life itself. You visit a small town's curia, its local council chamber. Once, these were the engines of Roman administration, run by educated landowners who funded public services, road repairs, games, aqueduct maintenance. Now, the seats are mostly empty. The few men who remain are either too old or too scared to refuse the role. That's right, scared. Because being on the town council means paying taxes for the town when no one else can. Many local elites are literally fleeing their civic duties to avoid bankruptcy. Historians still debate whether this collapse of local governance was the tipping point. After all, Rome's strength wasn't just its emperors, it was the smooth operation of 1,000 cities. But now, those cities are cracking. Here's a quirky example in one Gallic town. The mayor tries to auction off public statues to pay for grain. No one buys them. People want food, not bronze emperors. And what about education? It's fading fast. You step into a classroom where a lone teacher tries to keep Latin grammar alive. His students barely listen. One is drawing horses. Another sneaks bites of a stolen apple. The teacher sighs. In the East, they memorize Homer. Here, they forget Caesar. Even the old Roman literature starts to vanish. You notice fewer scrolls in libraries, fewer poets reciting at festivals. One day, a young boy asks you, "Who was Cicero?" You pause. How do you explain Cicero to someone who's never seen a forum that wasn't falling apart? In Italy, things are a bit better. Rome still has senators, schools, and infrastructure. But the decay is there too, just better hidden. You meet a noblewoman who reads Virgil aloud during dinner, but she's surrounded by guards and afraid to leave the city walls. In North Africa, a bishop warns that the people no longer read. They only listen to gossip. Sermons replace speeches. Psalms replace poems. Not that this is bad, just different. The culture is shifting from a classical, civic-minded one to a spiritual, tribal, fragmented one. One scholar calls this era the Great Forgetting. You write that phrase down. It feels heavy, But the brain drain isn't just physical. It's emotional, intellectual, cultural. You see artists abandon marble for wood. Architects stop designing domes and start building walls. Scientists disappear. Inventions stall. No more water clocks. No new aqueducts. No fresh engineering marvels. The focus turns inward. Protect. Preserve. Survive. You notice another strange trend: self-sufficiency. Villas become fortified mini-worlds. Wealthy families grow their own food, mint their own coins, even train their own guards. One landowner shows you his personal school and armory. We're not Roman anymore, he says. We're our own thing. It's subtle at first, but you feel it. The West is shrinking, not just in borders, but in imagination. Meanwhile, the church fills the intellectual vacuum. Monasteries preserve texts, offer schooling, and debate theology. You walk into a scriptorium where a monk is copying out Augustine's Confessions. He smiles. We can't save the empire, but we can save the soul. Even so, you sense that something irreplaceable is being lost. In one abandoned library, you find a half-burned scroll of Livy's history. A rat has chewed through part of it. You trace the holes with your finger and wonder how many voices from the past will never be heard again. There's a moment, a quiet one, that lingers with you. You sit beside a fading fountain in a Roman square. Once, this place would have been full of lawyers, poets, teachers, students. Now it's you, the pigeons, and a weathered statue with no nose. You whisper a line of Latin you remember from school. No one answers, and you realize a civilization isn't just walls and coins and laws. It's people, minds, memories, and in the West, they're slipping away. Ash drifts softly through the sky like snow, clinging to your tunic as you walk through the gates of Rome. Only, the gates are broken. One hangs half off its hinges. The other is wide open, like a mouth that forgot how to close. You step inside the city, but it's not the Rome you remember. It's 410 CE, and Rome has just been sacked. You knew this was coming. You saw Alaric march. You saw senators argue and emperors stall. But now that you're here, breathing the smoke and walking past shattered marble, it still doesn't feel real. This was Rome, Caput Mundi, the heart of the world, and now it's bruised, broken, and eerily silent. You pass the Forum first. Once the epicenter of law, debate, and ceremony, it's now a graveyard of toppled columns and trampled scrolls. A statue of Jupiter lies face down, his beard chipped off. Children barefoot and filthy poke at the wreckage with sticks. A woman picks through the rubble for anything she can trade. You recognize her tunic. It's made from a cut-up Senate banner. How did it come to this? You trace it back to that crucial moment when the city's defenses were ignored, when negotiations failed, when Alaric finally stopped asking and started taking. The third time, he laid siege. He didn't leave. His Visigoths poured through the gates, some say, opened from within by slaves. Others say the guards simply ran, but this wasn't a chaotic bloodbath. Alaric gave orders. Christian churches were off limits. He wanted wealth, not genocide. Yet in the shuffle, chaos always finds a way. Fires were lit, doors smashed, bodies fell, and for 3 days, Rome glorious, Imperial Rome was looted by outsiders. You stop in front of a temple that's been gutted, once dedicated to Saturn, now stripped for its bronze. A cross has been carved into one of the remaining stones. It's not clear whether it's a mark of faith or graffiti. You reach out and touch it. It's still warm. Inside one of the palaces, you see a mosaic floor cracked under muddy boots. The fine glass pieces glitter dully. A noble family huddles in the corner, wrapped in cloaks, pretending it's still yesterday. A child clutches a silver spoon like it's a sword. Quirky detail the Visigoths stole furniture and silk, but left behind a shipment of ostrich feathers. They didn't know what to do with them. A boy now waves one around like a royal fan. You follow the sound of singing low, solemn, in Latin. A church service. Survivors gather in prayer, their voices ragged but determined. You watch a bishop give communion to a soldier who helped defend the walls. His arm is bandaged. His eyes are hollow. And here's the real tragedy. Rome wasn't even the capital anymore. Politically, the seat of Western power had moved to Ravenna. But symbolically, Rome was still everything. The soul of the empire. The very idea of civilization. So when it fell, even briefly, the shock waves rippled everywhere. In Carthage, merchants panic. In Gaul, aristocrats whisper of fleeing even farther west. In Constantinople, the news is met with disbelief. The emperor weeps publicly. And St. Jerome, writing in Bethlehem, groans, "If Rome can perish, what city can be safe?" Historians still argue about the sack's true impact. Some say it was more psychological than physical that Rome survived, rebuilt, kept functioning. Others argue it shattered the illusion of invincibility, and that's what doomed the West. The truth is probably both, but you can feel it. Something essential has changed. You pass the old Senate building. The doors are gone. The seats inside are cracked. Pigeons have claimed the rafters. A lone senator stands there, as if waiting for the others. You recognize him once loud and powerful, now silent, staring at nothing. Later, in the Suburra, the working-class district, you help a woman dig through rubble for her missing brother. You don't find him, but you do find his coin pouch empty. But for a small carved charm of mercury, she keeps it. "He always liked to travel," she says, trying to smile. And then, something strange. You walk into a plaza where street performers are juggling. Yes, juggling. Children laugh. A musician plays a reed flute. A man sells wine from a broken amphora. Rome, even wounded, still lives. You sit by a public fountain that's somehow still flowing. Someone's cleaned out the grime. Someone lit a lantern by its edge. Someone cared enough to make it beautiful again. And you realize Rome's fall isn't about a single event. It's a process, a slow fading, a sputtering candle, not a lightning bolt. One philosopher puts it best as you share a meal of lentils and stale bread. We are not the Rome of Caesar or Augustus. We are the Rome of memory. A shadow still cast across the world. You nod. You've seen it. The fall is happening, but the echo is still loud, still bright in places. And in this city of ash, even after the sack, you find small embers of pride, of culture, of stubborn, unbelievable hope. The room is thick with smoke and whispers. You sit off to the side, tucked beneath a tattered Roman banner, and watch as the real rulers of the Western Empire argue not emperors, but generals, hardened men in worn armor, hands stained with ink and blood, voices rough from battle and betrayal. The emperor, he's not even in the room. Welcome to the era of puppets and puppet masters. By the mid-5th century, the emperors of the Western Roman Empire are mostly symbolic, like cardboard cutouts propped up for ceremony. The true power belongs to the men behind them, ambitious generals who command the troops, control the treasury, and pull the strings from the shadows. You're watching Stilicho, the first of these puppet masters, pace the room, tall, sharp-eyed, part Roman, part Vandal. He was once the protector of the young Emperor Honorius, but these days, his leash feels very short. The court hates him. The army only half trusts him. Still, he wins battles, keeps the borders barely intact, and for a while, he's the only thing standing between Rome and total collapse. Then, of course, it all goes sideways. Accusations fly. He's plotting with barbarians. He's stealing funds. Honorius, ever the indecisive chicken enthusiast, signs the execution order. Stilicho is murdered by his own troops. Some of them even kill his son. No trial, no ceremony, just gone. And Rome, it just lost its best general. You ask one guard what he thinks about it. He shrugs. Better generals than emperors these days. And he's right. Fast forward a few decades. You meet Flavius Aetius, another brilliant commander. He's known as the last of the Romans. He's a man of vision, charisma, and questionable friends. You know how some people say, I know a guy. Aetius really knows a guy. Attila the Hun. They were once hostages together as boys. When Attila marches west in 451 CE, threatening Gaul, it's Aetius who rallies the Romans and Visigoths and manages a narrow, bloody victory at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. It's not a complete defeat of the Huns, but it's enough to make Attila turn back, and Rome breathes just barely. So what do you think happens next? You watch Aetius walk into the imperial palace in 454 CE to present his latest plans. The Emperor Valentinian III doesn't even let him finish his report. He draws a dagger and kills him in front of the court. Your jaw drops. The emperor mutters, "No man should be stronger than his emperor," which is rich, coming from a guy who hasn't fought a battle in his life and wears sandals that cost more than an officer's yearly salary. A few months later, the emperor is assassinated by Aetius's former bodyguards. Are you sensing a theme? Historians still argue whether this pattern, strong generals, weak emperors, was inevitable. Maybe the system made it so. Or maybe, once the emperors became figureheads, someone had to step in. Someone who could command soldiers and supply lines and keep the borders from falling like dominoes. Next, enter Ricimer, a name most people don't know, but should. He's a Germanic general, technically not even Roman, but he becomes the real ruler of the West for over a decade. He never takes the title of emperor. That'd be too obvious. Instead, he installs emperors like furniture, useful until they break. You meet one such emperor, Majorian, young, ambitious, actually trying to fix things. He reforms the army, launches a campaign to rebuild the navy, cracks down on corruption. He's kind of impressive. So naturally, Ricimer has him arrested, tortured, and executed. You sigh. Later, you overhear a soldier joke. Why bother naming emperors? Just call them next. Everyone laughs. The laughter is hollow. Here's a quirky tidbit. One puppet emperor, Avitus, was so unpopular that his own troops refused to defend him. He fled the palace dressed as a bishop. Some say he tried to bribe his way onto a merchant ship. Others say he died choking on dry bread. Either way, he's forgotten. Meanwhile, Ricimer keeps the wheel turning. He installs Libius Severus, then Anthemius, then Olybrius, each one weaker than the last, like copies of copies. Rome is still ruled, technically, but in reality, the emperors are mannequins in purple cloaks. You watch one coronation that feels more like a play. Trumpets blare. Soldiers cheer on command. The new emperor stands stiffly as a gold crown is lowered onto his head. He tries to smile. You know he won't last 5 years. This, you realize, is the fatal irony. Rome was built on strong institutions, law, order, hierarchy. Now, those institutions are being used as camouflage by warlords in Roman uniforms. The machinery of empire still turns, but the hands cranking it aren't Roman. And the people they know. In a village in northern Italy, you hear a farmer scoff at the mention of his imperial majesty. He spits. Which one I've lost track. You walk through Ravenna, the current capital of the Western Empire, and see palaces half empty, fountains dry, guards drunk. The court still sends out proclamations, stamps them with wax seals, and acts like it matters. But you know better. Even the Eastern Empire is watching this with a mix of embarrassment and fear. You read a letter from Constantinople that refers to the Western court as a sinking ship with too many captains. Harsh, but fair. Eventually, Ricimer dies, and with him goes the last semblance of coordinated power in the West. In his place, more generals, more puppets, more scrambling. Rome no longer has a captain, just men fighting over the wheel. And as you leave Ravenna, walking along roads built centuries ago by real visionaries, you realize something chilling. This isn't a government, it's a costume, and everyone's wearing it until the seams fall apart. The sea breeze cuts through your cloak as you step onto the rocky shore of North Africa. It smells of salt and rotting wood ships that didn't make it. Cargoes lost to waves or worse. You turn inland, but you're not greeted by Roman roads or watchtowers. You're in Vandal territory now. Yes, those Vandals, the name that modern language turned into a synonym for wanton destruction. But here's the twist. They didn't just break things. They conquered. They ruled. They took one of the Roman Empire's most vital arteries, and they never gave it back. You follow the trail of their conquests, beginning in Hispania. After Rome pulled troops to defend Italy, the Vandals crossed the Pyrenees, swept through southern Spain, and then unexpectedly made a bold move. They built ships. They crossed the sea. In 429 CE, you stand on a beach and watch as roughly 80,000 Vandals and their families land in North Africa, led by Genseric, a wiry, cunning, one-eyed king who knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't want to sack cities. He wants infrastructure. He wants ports, grain, power, and he takes it. You visit Carthage just a few years later, the second city of the Western Empire, Rome's oldest rival, and now the Vandal capital. It's still beautiful, still wealthy, but the imperial eagle has been replaced by strange banners, and the people speak a jumbled mix of Latin and Germanic dialects. The oddest part, it works. Genseric doesn't raise the city. He uses it, builds his navy, strengthens his position. Now he controls the grain shipments that once fed Rome. You watch senators squirm as they calculate how long can Italy survive without African wheat. Here's a quirky detail. Genseric was so obsessed with naval supremacy that he built hidden shipyards in groves and hillsides. His enemies couldn't find them, but his fleets would suddenly appear like sea ghosts, raiding Corsica, Sicily, even Greece. By the mid-5th century, the Mediterranean Rome's beloved Mare Nostrum, our sea isn't Roman anymore. It's Vandal, and no Roman fleet can stop them. You watch the shock hit Rome like thunder. In 455 CE, Rome suffers its second great humiliation. Genseric sails into the Tiber. The Emperor Petronius Maximus panics and flees the city, only to be stoned to death by his own people. No leadership, no defense, no plan. The Vandals don't even need siege weapons. The gates open, Rome falls. Again, but this sack feels different from Alaric's in 410. Genseric's troops loot ruthlessly for 2 straight weeks. Churches, temples, palaces stripped bare. Relics, gold, statues taken. Even the roof tiles of the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, are peeled off and shipped to Carthage. And here's the detail that sticks with you. They steal the treasure of the Jewish temple, gold menorahs and sacred items once taken from Jerusalem by Titus in 70 CE, now taken again. Looted loot, a second-hand holy robbery. Historians still argue whether the Vandals were as savage as the stories claim. Some say the violence was exaggerated by Roman chroniclers trying to save face. Others say the damage was real, especially to morale. You meet a Roman bishop afterward who says, "They didn't just take our gold, they took our dignity." And they didn't stop there. From North Africa, the Vandals continue to raid Roman territory like clockwork. Sardinia, Sicily, southern Italy, none are safe. You ride with a Roman commander sent to intercept one of their fleets. His soldiers are exhausted, poorly paid, poorly fed. When the Vandals attack, they drop their spears and run. Rome no longer rules the waves. Even the Eastern Empire gets dragged into the mess. Emperor Leo Formai tries to take Carthage back in 468 CE. He assembles a massive invasion force, $1,000 ships, 100,000 men. You're aboard one of them, crammed in with nervous marines and barrels of stale grain. Spirits are high. Finally, a real counterattack. Then, disaster. As the fleet approaches, Genseric pulls a classic Vandal move. He offers to negotiate, stalling for time. Then, when the Romans are at anchor, he sends in fire ships vessels soaked in pitch and set ablaze. The Roman fleet goes up like a tinderbox. It's one of the most expensive failures in imperial history. Some say it bankrupted the Eastern treasury. The West, already broke, gets nothing from the campaign but more fear. You walk the docks in Ravenna later that year. Sailors refuse to go south. Merchants hoard grain. A senator slams his fist on a marble table and shouts, "How did barbarians become the masters of the sea?" And there it is, the core of the problem. Rome is still clinging to old assumptions that it owns the seas, that it sets the terms, that it is the center. But the Vandals, they've rewritten the rules. They don't want Roman titles. They want Roman resources, and they've taken them. You return to Carthage once more. Genseric is older now, but still sharp, still scheming. You ask what his goal is. He laughs. Rome made us enemies. So we took their bread and their ships. What else is there? And you realize they didn't sack Rome out of rage. They did it out of strategy. This isn't chaos. This is conquest. And the Western Empire. It's starving, bleeding, and looking nervously to the sea, wondering where the next Vandal sail will appear. You're walking a tightrope stretched across an empire east on one end, west on the other, and the rope is fraying fast. The air crackles with tension, as if the empire itself is trying to decide whether to stay united or split in two forever. Spoiler, it's already split. You're just here to feel the aftershocks. Once upon a time, Rome was one. One emperor, one senate, one army, one glorious, globe-conquering identity. But now, in the late 4th and 5th centuries, there are two empires, and they act like bickering siblings who only show up for holidays and funerals. You're in Ravenna, the current capital of the Western Empire. It's swampy, cold, and weirdly defensive, a city built more for hiding than ruling. Across the sea, in Constantinople, it's another story, entirely golden mosaics, bustling markets, schools, bathhouses, armies that still get paid on time. It's like comparing an aging country house with a leaky roof to a 5-star hotel with heated floors. You ride through Italy and hear the grumblings. Why won't the East help us? Aren't we all Romans? The answer depends on who you ask. From the Eastern court's point of view, the West is a mess, corrupt, weak, and full of barbarian in-laws. They're not wrong. You've seen the puppet emperors, the starving cities, the generals who act like kings. From their marble halls, it's easy to say, let it fall, but every now and then, guilt or politics kicks in. The East sends money, or troops, or a half-hearted marriage alliance. You attend one such royal wedding in Ravenna. The Eastern Emperor's daughter is marrying a Western Emperor. No one looks thrilled. One guest mutters, well, at least it's not another war. That's the core of the problem. The East is trying to stay stable. The West is barely holding it together. And unity. It's a slogan now, not a strategy. You find an old map in a scholar's villa. The lines of the empire are still drawn as one giant mass. He's painted over it in red ink, dividing east and west with a jagged stroke. Just being honest. He tells you with a shrug, historians still argue whether the division doomed Rome. Was it practical, strategic, or a fatal fracture? Some say the East and West just had different needs. Others say it turned a strong empire into two weak ones. Either way, you're living in the consequences. Travel is harder. Taxes are different. Laws start to diverge. A merchant from Antioch gets into a legal dispute in Gaul and can't understand the courts. It's all still Rome. He protests. The magistrate just laughs. You walk into a Western military camp and find that half the troops speak Germanic languages. The other half barely speak at all. You ask one officer what his orders are. He says, wait to see what Constantinople tells us. He's been waiting for 3 months. Even the church reflects the division. Bishops in the West argue about papal supremacy, while the East talks about divine wisdom and Greek metaphysics. You attend a sermon in Milan where the priest warns. The Eastern Church thinks it is wiser. But wisdom without Rome is vanity. Bold words, especially when Rome can't even feed itself. In the East, emperors like Theodosius II build walls literally and metaphorically. Constantinople becomes a fortress of bureaucracy, theology, and wealth. When the Huns show up, they negotiate, bribe, or fight depending on the mood. But they never act surprised. That's the difference. Meanwhile, in the West, they act surprised every time. You watch a Western official beg the East for help when the Vandals cut off grain shipments. The reply? A polite refusal. We regret your hardship. Hold firm. God be with you. Translation. Good luck. You're on your own. Here's a quirky bit. When Rome was first divided, the idea was that the two halves would still cooperate like a senior and junior emperor team. That idea lasted about as long as a snowball in the Sahara. Within a generation, they're playing political chess with bishops, generals, and bribes. You walk past a crumbling statue of Constantine, the emperor who once united everything. His nose is missing, his name barely legible. A child throws a stone at the base and runs. You pick up the rock and wonder, is this what unity looks like now? And then comes the real heartbreak. When Rome falls, spoiler alert, we're almost there. The East doesn't send an army, doesn't hold a funeral, doesn't even lower their flags. They simply nod and move on, because by then, they've stopped thinking of the West as us. You cross the Adriatic and arrive in Constantinople, expecting pity or concern. Instead, you find people shopping, debating theology, drinking wine. Life goes on. One merchant asks, "What's new in the West?" You tell him Rome is collapsing. He shrugs. They had a good run. You stare across the Bosporus at the glittering skyline. Then back toward the west, where the sun sets and the fires burn. Rome isn't dying because of one enemy or one bad emperor. It's dying because it's not whole anymore. You stand on a grassy hill in what used to be a Roman province, except now. The banners waving in the wind don't bear the eagle. They carry wolves, ravens, and wild shapes in bright, foreign dyes. The men wearing them speak Latin. Sort of. They carry Roman swords. Sometimes. And they rule over Roman land. But they aren't Roman. Not exactly. Welcome to the strange twilight of the Western Empire, where the generals wear Roman cloaks, but their bloodlines and loyalties stretch beyond the Rhine. This is the rise of the barbarian-kings men, who claim imperial legitimacy with one hand and hold a war axe in the other. You meet one such king early on, Theodoric I, king of the Visigoths. You remember his people once mistreated migrants, then marauding invaders. Now they've set up shop in Gaul, ruling from Toulouse with Roman advisors, Roman tax codes, and even Roman titles. You attend his court and hear Latin and Gothic used interchangeably. One noble recites lines from Virgil. Another complains the new tax collector can't read. It's like someone squished two civilizations together and hoped they'd stick. Historians still argue whether this is the beginning of medieval Europe or just the stretched-out death of Rome. Some call it barbarization. Others say it's just the Roman system evolving under new management. You call it weird because these new kings, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Burgundians, Franks don't want to destroy Rome. They want to inherit it. They crave legitimacy. They crave the aura. You see, Theodoric II have coins minted with a Roman emperor on one side, and his own name tucked into the margins. Subtle, not subtle. Even Genseric, the Vandal king you saw looting Rome, makes a show of adopting Roman customs. His scribes wear togas. His laws are written in Latin. One of his advisors jokes, "We're better Romans than the Romans." You can't tell if he's kidding, but while these new kings put on the costume of Rome, the seams are starting to tear. You walk into a town in Hispania and find a Gothic governor trying to enforce a Roman edict from 50 years ago. The local villagers laugh and wave him off. "That law died before my grandfather," one man says, chuckling through missing teeth. The infrastructure is still there barely. Roads, cities, aqueducts, but no one's maintaining them. The bureaucrats are underpaid. The engineers have become monks. You step through a once mighty Roman courthouse turned into a storage barn. Hay bales rest beneath a weathered statue of justice. There's a word you start hearing, Rex. King, not imperator, not consul, just Rex. And yet, the documents still carry the old forms. You hold a treaty between the Western Empire and the Visigoths. It's addressed from the divine Augustus to our faithful ally. You ask the messenger if the emperor actually wrote it. He laughs. He hasn't written anything in years. The kings are now kingmakers, and in some cases, kings without any Roman approval at all. Take Childeric, a Frankish king you meet in northern Gaul. He fights for the Romans when it suits him, and raids their towns when it doesn't. He wears Roman boots, a Roman ring, and Roman armor, but he also sacrifices bulls to gods that haven't been worshipped in Italy for centuries. You attend one of his feasts. Boar roasted over a fire, goblets carved from horn, soldiers boasting in 3 languages. It's a party Rome would never have recognized, but also never quite rejected. This, one old Roman mutters to you, is what happens when no one's watching the gates. And then there's Odoacer. He's a barbarian soldier of uncertain background, part Germanic, part Scythian, all ambition. In 476 CE, you follow him into Italy, where he marches on Ravenna, removes the last emperor, we'll get to him soon, and declares himself ruler of Italy. He doesn't call himself emperor, just Rex Italia, king of Italy. But make no mistake, he's in charge. You see him send the imperial regalia crown, scepter, robe back to Constantinople. A quiet message: we don't need a Western emperor anymore. One head of Rome is enough. The Eastern emperor accepts the gesture. Maybe he's relieved. You're standing in the moment when the West officially stops pretending. The last paper-thin veil of imperial rule is pulled away, and underneath is a mosaic of kings and tribes and local warlords, all wearing the faded clothes of an empire they barely understand. Here's a quirky twist. Some of these kings out-Roman the Romans. They keep Latin alive. They pass laws inspired by Theodosius and Justinian. They host games, build aqueducts, sponsor art. You even hear of a Gothic king who quotes Cicero during a trial. It sounds weird with a Gothic accent, but you appreciate the effort. Still, you know what's missing. There's no central authority, no senate that matters, no emperor commanding armies from his marble hall, no Pax Romana. Rome isn't governing anymore. It's haunting. Its symbols live on. Its language echoes. But the soul of the empire has moved on, fractured into dozens of little kingdoms, each one trying to be the heir of something that can't really be inherited. You sit by a crumbling milestone on the Appian Way. A weed sprouts through the carved letters. A caravan passes Ostrogothic traders, carrying Roman wine in Roman amphorae, speaking Latin through thick accents. You wave, they wave back, and just like that, you realize Rome didn't fall like a tower. It faded like a sunset, casting its last warm light on men who now wear its crown. Without knowing quite how it fits, you stand in a grand chamber. Its marble floor, dusty, its columns cracked, but the light still catches the gold thread in the imperial banners. Before you sits the emperor of the Western Roman Empire. His robe is oversized. His sandals don't fit. His crown slips slightly to one side. He's a child, Romulus, Augustulus, little Augustus, the last emperor of the West. Barely 14, maybe 15. No one's really sure. His voice hasn't even fully changed, but he's sitting on the throne of Caesar, holding the scepter of men, like Marcus Aurelius. You can't decide if it's tragic, hilarious, or both. The year is 475 CE. His father, Orestes, a Roman general of barbarian heritage, has just seized power in Ravenna and placed his son on the throne. It's a bold PR move. Romulus is a name steeped in myth, Rome's legendary founder, and Augustulus, a diminutive of Augustus, the first true emperor. But everyone knows what this really is, a puppet show. The court pretends. They issue edicts. They mint coins. You hold one in your hand, it's flimsy. The face barely stamped. But it still says, Imperator Caesar, Romulus Augustus, Pius Felix. You want to believe it. You really do. But you also know what's coming. Odoacer, remember him, is marching toward Ravenna with an army of barbarian troops who are sick of being underpaid and unrecognized. They demanded land in Italy. Orestes refused. So now Odoacer is coming to collect with steel. You follow the panic through the corridors. Officials flee. Senators beg for sanctuary. Generals mutter about holding out behind the city walls. You glance at Romulus. He sits quietly, chewing his lip, gripping the edge of the throne like it might keep him anchored in a world that's slipping away. One night, he asks a servant, "Am I really emperor?" The servant doesn't answer. Historians still debate whether Romulus Augustulus was even technically an emperor. The Eastern Empire never recognized him. He wasn't elected by the Senate. But hey, when everyone's pretending, does it really matter? And then inevitably, Odoacer arrives. Ravenna falls quickly. The defenses crumble. Orestes is captured and executed. You don't see it happen, but the rumor spreads fast. Beheaded, some say his body was dumped in a ditch. Others claim he was buried in secret by loyalists. Either way, he's gone, and Romulus, Odoacer spares him. You're there when it happens, when the boy is brought before the general. He looks smaller than ever in the empty throne room, his eyes wide but dry. He's not trembling. He's not begging. He just stands there in silence, as if he's already accepted that this was never truly his to hold. Odoacer, to his credit, shows mercy. He removes Romulus from the throne and sends him into comfortable exile in Campania. No prison, no execution, just obscurity. He gives the boy a pension and a villa by the sea. You ride with Romulus for part of the journey south. He doesn't say much, just watches the trees pass. At one point, he asks if he can bring his old tutor. You say yes. Later, you hear that he lives quietly for years, reading scrolls, tending a garden, walking the coastline. Some say he became a monk. Others believe he wrote poetry A few whisper that he drowned himself, but most just forget him. That's the strangest part. The last emperor of the Western Roman Empire didn't go out with a sword or a scream. He just faded. There's something oddly poetic about it. Rome's first emperor, Augustus, died surrounded by pomp. His last words supposedly asking if he had played his role well. The last emperor, he gets no audience, no marble tomb, no parade, just wind, salt air, and the occasional visitor who stumbles across his villa and wonders who the quiet man with the sad eyes used to be. Here's a quirky historical footnote in some sources. Romulus isn't even listed as the final emperor. They skip him entirely, like an asterisk, as if history can't decide whether he was a ruler or just a footnote in the long spiraling fall of something much bigger than he could ever grasp. And maybe that's the truth. You stand one last time in the throne room where he once sat. The room is cold now, empty. The banner's gone. A bird nests in the rafters. Dust motes dance in the sunlight. No trumpet sounded. No legion rebelled. No citizen cried out. Just one quiet moment where Rome, at least in the West, let go. And in that silence, you realize it's not always the warriors or the tyrants who symbolize an ending. Sometimes it's a boy in a crown that never quite fit. No crowds gather. No obituaries are written. No final decree is carved in stone. It's September 476 CE, and the Western Roman Empire dies without a whisper. You sit on a hillside just outside Ravenna, watching the sun set over the marshlands. The roads are quiet. There's no trumpet blast, no black banner raised to mark the end of a civilization. And yet you feel it, that hollow, aching shift in the air, like a great bell has rung somewhere far away, and only your bones heard it. Romulus Augustulus is gone, tucked away in exile. Odoacer is in control now, not as an emperor, but as Rex Italiae, the king of Italy. He doesn't even bother pretending there's still a Western Roman Empire. No puppet, no paper-thin heir. Instead, he sends the imperial regalia, the crown, the purple cloak, the scepter to Constantinople. Basically, we're done here. You can have this back. The Eastern Emperor, Zeno, nods politely. There's no outrage, no emergency Senate session. He simply accepts that Rome in the West has collapsed, and that for now, Odoacer will rule Italy on his behalf, in name only. That's the trick. Rome doesn't explode. It's absorbed. You ride through towns across Italy and watch as people continue their lives, confused, but not necessarily panicked. Farmers still plow their fields. Bakers still light their ovens. Priests still chant Latin prayers. Most of them never knew who Romulus was to begin with. You overhear a merchant say, "Emperor. We haven't had a real one in years." Another man laughs. The boy with the crown thought he was a priest's son. Even the Senate still exists in theory. You sit in a chamber in Rome where a handful of aging senators meet under flickering oil lamps. They talk about property lines and grain taxes, not empire or destiny. You can practically hear the dust settling, and you realize something strange. The empire isn't gone. It's just stopped being Roman. Odoacer doesn't raise cities or tear down statues. He keeps the Roman tax system, the Roman calendar, Roman administrators, even Roman court fashion. He just replaces the name at the top. It's like someone bought the company and quietly fired the old CEO. Historians still argue whether 476 was really the end. Some say it was just another transition, one of many in Rome's long, shape-shifting history. Others say it was the final curtain call. But standing here, among the people who barely noticed, you start to suspect the end was more of a soft sigh than a shattering fall. You walk through a once proud Roman military fort. The walls are intact, the barracks are occupied, but the men inside don't call themselves legionnaires anymore. They're just soldiers. Their banners are stitched with new symbols. Their orders come from Odoacer now, and no one questions it. You meet a man who used to be an imperial courier. His horse is gone. His routes have been taken over by Gothic patrols. He now runs messages for a local warlord. Same job. He shrugs. Less paperwork. In a village in northern Italy, a boy scratches letters into a tablet. He's writing in Latin, but barely. The grammar's slipping. The accent is strange. You help him with a phrase from Virgil. He looks confused. Who's Virgil? That's when it hits you. The real end of Rome isn't in the sacking, or the assassinations, or even the exile of the last emperor. It's in the forgetting, the loss of identity, of shared stories, of that thread that once connected farmers in Britannia to generals in Carthage and scribes in Syria. It's unraveling now. Thread by thread, you hear whispers of new kingdoms rising. Visigoths in Spain, Burgundians in Gaul, Franks under a young warlord named Clovis. None of them call themselves Romans. Not really. Not anymore. But Rome isn't completely gone. It's hiding in the arches of old aqueducts, in the Latin carved above crumbling doorways, in the quiet traditions that survive even as their names are forgotten. One day, a monk will copy down the Aeneid by candlelight. One day, a pope will crown a new emperor and call it the Holy Roman Empire. One day, school children will chant SPQR without fully understanding what it meant. But right now, in this moment, Rome, as you knew it, has died. No explosion, no final battle, just a quiet refusal to continue. You find yourself back in the forum, weeds growing between the stones, a donkey braes where senators once orated, pigeons roost in the arches of the Temple of Saturn. The air smells of damp stone and distant fires, and yet there's beauty in the silence, the kind of beauty you only notice after something immense has passed. A sunset, a funeral, an empire. You close your eyes and listen, not for legions, not for trumpets, just the soft breath of history exhaling. Rome is gone, and the world is already moving on. You wander now through the afterimage of an empire. It's the 6th century, and the Western Roman Empire is no more, but its bones still shape the world around you. You walk through what was once Cisalpine Gaul, now a patchwork of petty kingdoms. One village swears loyalty to a Gothic lord, the next to a Roman bishop, and a third just prays no one comes knocking. And yet, the ghost of Rome lingers. You pass an old milestone along the road to Milan. The inscription is barely legible. You run your fingers over the carved letters Via Augusta. The road is still in use. Farmers cart their goods over it. Soldiers ride it. No one remembers who Augusta was. That's how it is now. Rome lives on in pieces. You stop in a church. one built over what used to be a Roman bathhouse. The priest chants in Latin, his voice echoing against the same walls where Romans once sweated and gossiped. The words of Cicero have faded, but the language survives in Scripture. You ask a deacon if he knows he's standing on imperial plumbing. He blinks. I thought that was just an old drain. The past is literally beneath their feet. Across Italy, Gaul, Hispania, even parts of North Africa, you see the same pattern. Villas converted into monasteries, forum squares now grazing grounds, a triumphal arch with goats chewing weeds beneath it. But don't think the fall of Rome meant everything collapsed into dust. That's the myth. What actually happened, things just shifted. You walk into a Gothic town near Toulouse. The buildings are still stone, the streets still paved. The merchants still tally accounts with Roman numerals. Their king holds court in a palace that was once a Roman governor's mansion. The mosaic floor is still there, cracked, but intact. You speak to an older woman selling bread. She speaks a muddy Latin mixed with local slang. My grandfather was a Roman citizen, she says. I think. You ask what she considers herself now. She shrugs. Just local. Just here. Identity has become regional, tribal, fluid. Historians still debate what to call this period. Late antiquity, early Middle Ages. The answer depends on what you're looking for. If you want marble, forums, and philosophy lectures, yes, that's gone. But if you're looking for continuity, for survival, for slow adaptation, you'll find it everywhere. Like in Ravenna, you revisit the city where emperors once ruled from palaces behind flooded marshes. Now, it belongs to Theodoric the Great, the Ostrogothic king. And here's the twist: he loves Roman culture. He preserves the Senate, pays for public buildings, keeps Roman laws. His court is packed with Latin scholars. You attend one of his banquet's long tables. Silver goblets, Roman etiquette, and lots of roasted boar. A bishop gives thanks in Latin. A Gothic noble replies with a toast in halting but eager Latin. You almost forget the empire is gone. But you also see the gaps. The roads are no longer patrolled. The aqueducts leak. Pirates raid coastal towns. Disease spreads without doctors. And where once there were tax-funded teachers, now there are monks teaching letters with worn-out scrolls. You watch one carefully scrape an old Roman manuscript to reuse the parchment. Whatever was written there is now lost. Here's a quirky detail in one church archive. You find an official tax document from a century earlier, signed by an imperial prefect, still on papyrus. The monk uses the back of it to jot down a grocery list. You ride through Gaul and notice that the grand cities have shrunk. Aurelian walls that once ringed bustling metropolises now enclose sleepy towns and overgrown fields. One city occupies a third of its old footprint. A bishop explains, why repair the whole wall when we only use half the space? Rome isn't dead, it's downsizing. You meet a man who still calls himself Romanus. He wears a tattered tunic with a faded eagle brooch. My father said we were citizens. He tells you, so I say it, too. Even if there's no emperor left, you ask if his children say the same. He frowns. They say they're Burgundian. Even memory has a shelf life, and yet here's the strange beauty of it all. The fall of Rome wasn't the end of civilization. It was a transformation, a remix. What follows is darker. Yes, but also full of new beginnings. You find a monastery on a hilltop in Hispania, where monks are copying not just scripture, but Virgil and Ovid. You find a merchant route reestablished between Italy and Byzantium. You see a bishop's school where grammar is still taught, poorly but persistently. You even watch children play a game of marbles on a broken Roman fountain. The past survives in fragments, echoes, and adaptations, but the world has changed. Rome is no longer the sun around which everything orbits. It's one star among many, and yet, as you leave one village, a little girl points to a crumbling statue in the distance and asks her mother, "Is that what Rome looked like?" Her mother smiles. Yes, once, and you realize Rome may have fallen, but it is still being remembered, and sometimes that's enough. You take one last look over your shoulder, the wind pulling gently at your cloak as you climb a hill outside the ruins of what was once a Roman fortress. From this height, you can see everything: the broken aqueducts, the scattered farmhouses built from temple stones, the faint curving outline of a long abandoned road that once connected the entire world. And now, you pause because it's time to ask the one question that's followed you since this journey began. Why did Rome fall? The truth is, no one answer fits. You've seen the empire rot from the inside, an economy that devoured itself, politics more chaotic than any reality show, armies that swore loyalty to generals instead of the state, and emperors so forgettable they needed name tags. You've stood among the hungry crowds in Rome during the sack of 410, and again in 455, and seen how an idea can be looted, just like a gold statue. You've watched the brightest minds drift east, watched the West hollow out from within, watched Rome's own defenses handed to the very tribes it once feared. So what was it? The Goths, the Huns, the Vandals. Sure, corruption, inflation. Maybe too many emperors, not enough emperors. That too. Historians still argue whether the fall of Rome was inevitable or accidental. Some say it was climate change, a drop in temperature, and a spike in droughts that wrecked harvests and pushed barbarian tribes toward Roman lands. Others point to lead poisoning, or plague, or the over-reliance on mercenaries who never felt Roman in the first place. Some even argue Rome never fell. It just morphed into something else. You sit in a crumbling amphitheater and weigh the pieces in your mind. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The moment you close your fingers, it's already slipped through. Here's something strange. As Rome declined, more people called themselves Roman than ever before. A Visigothic king might wear a Roman title. A Frankish bishop might quote Roman law. Even Charlemagne, centuries later, would call himself the new Imperator Romanorum. So maybe the fall wasn't a plunge. Maybe it was a long, confused fade into something new. You pull out a coin, worn, bent, almost featureless now. But if you tilt it just right, in the fading sunlight, you can just make out the profile of a man wearing a laurel crown, an emperor, forgotten by most, but not by you. And that's the point, isn't it? Rome mattered, still matters. Its fall isn't just a historical footnote, it's a mirror of ambition, of fragility, of how even the strongest systems, the grandest dreams, can crumble when pushed from too many sides at once. But it's also a warning. Civilizations don't fall all at once. They crack. They ignore the warning signs. They pretend tomorrow will always look like yesterday until one day, the world has changed. and no one knows quite when it happened. So the real question isn't why did Rome fall? It's, could it happen again? And that, dear traveler, is up to us. And so, here you are. You've walked the broken streets of Rome, listened to the last boy emperor sigh beneath a too heavy crown, felt the chill of forgotten libraries, and tasted the dust of lost dreams. But what was the fall of Rome? Really, it wasn't just the end of an empire. It was a lesson one whispered through centuries, one still echoing beneath your feet every time you walk across a city square or read a word of Latin. Rome didn't fall in a blaze of glory. It fell quietly, bit by bit, voice by voice, until even the people inside it didn't quite realize what they had lost until it was gone. And in that way, Rome is all of us, because every society faces choices: what to protect, what to abandon, what to remember. Rome reminds us what happens when we forget what truly holds us together. But here's the hope: some things survived. Law, language, faith, architecture, and stories like the one you've just heard. If you made it this far, thank you. You're the kind of listener who keeps history alive. And now, I want to hear from you. What did you think of Rome's fall? Was it a tragedy, a transformation, or a little of both? Let me know in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear your story too. If you enjoyed this journey through time, please give this video a like and subscribe to catch more stories that bring the past to life. Your support means everything. Now close your eyes. Breathe deep. Let the echoes of the empire fade into sleep. Sweet dreams, traveler.